such a privilege to be with all of you for the next hour or so in this lovely space to share my story. And the question you asked is a good one because it actually talks to the methodology. And the notion is that we are wiser beyond what we really believe. We do a lot of things by instinct, intuitively, because a sense of community is a human thing, of association, of being with others, of doing something together. That's human. And when I said I did it backwards, it was that I was doing work as I worked in my own space and feeding my way through this thing about how do I bring humanity back into the spaces in which I was working. And I experimented with this in many ways and many things that didn't work. But the sense was always that if you got people to share their stories in an intimate space and people felt listened to, that was always the starting point of the work as we shared the stories. And so reading Peter's book later on just gave me lots of aha moments. I said, oh my goodness, this structure that Peter was talking about was actually the same basic thing. But the difference was Peter gave me a structure on which to hang these things that made perfect sense. And so lots of aha moments, but the sense, so now I have some tools and an idea that whenever I engage, if I go through these things more consciously, every step of the way, there's always a good engagement. We might never reach the outcome that we expect, but people leave that session having felt seen, heard, and loved, having engaged each other, met strangers in the room. And that for me has always been an output. That's the output and the outcome that we don't measure very often. And that simply says that if I feel engaged enough, I will come back into the room. And if I come back into the room, it means the conversation is alive. And it gets a life of its own. It takes us where it wants to go to. And the notion for me was that letting go of my need to control, to be in charge, to facilitate in the traditional facilitator role of leading from the front. And in the face of a powerful story, there's actually no place for arrogance or for being smart or being the wisest person in the room. A story does that because it's just it's a story of their life. And so you can't put any smart twists on it. You can't gimmickize it. You can't do anything with it, just the story. And so that notion of stories became the central point of all my work. Whatever I chose to do, it was always, what's the story? What story are you carrying right now? What is your story? And I realized if you create a space to share the story, that is the first connection piece. And that often gives us the agenda for the work. Because the notion of saying, start where you are at, where they are at, not where you want to take them to. Sometimes those things are not congruent. We have an outcome in mind and we manipulate and facilitate people to get to that desired end. And people know that. So we play these ridiculous games with each other, very political, have a nice time together, but nothing transformational happened in this space. So there's a long answer to your question, Maya, but that's basically when I say I got it backwards, is that for me, Peter's work was an affirmation that the wisdom is in the room, that even those of us as facilitators who know instinctively what we should do in the room, second guess ourselves, because there are too many leadership gurus out there tell us how to do this right, how to lead from the front, how to be the expert in the room, how to be the wisest person in the room. And it was unlearning all of that. So Peter's was a breath of fresh air to say, actually, you just need to turn up as yourself, as fully and as present as possible in service of the client group, in service of the client group, not in service of myself. And when I got that notion, it's not about me, it's about them, that was one of the moments, the switching moments for me in that space. And it really started for me in 1993, a long time ago, in South Africa, we were birthing this new democracy. And I was asked to head up a very big NGO. And our task was very simple. Teach people about democracy. Because they had no idea. We had come out of 150 years of oppression and pain and trauma, and suddenly we were free. But we didn't know what to do with this freedom. And so our task, go out and teach people what democracy means. And naively, I thought it was about teaching people how to vote and which party to choose, and understanding what local government was about. And I did that for a couple of years and realized that this really wasn't cutting it. Because people came to the workshops and they understood that very easily in half an hour. You don't need to teach people how to vote. It was how to live into this new culture of democracy, which they never had before, and to claim their space, because the state, although they said they had given them the power and the responsibility and the freedom, living it was very different. It was very, very different for us. And so the notion, when I realized it wasn't working, it was back to basic to say, what am I doing wrong here? We're spending lots of money. Everybody was doing that, but there was no impact. The political parties ruled the roost. And I saw the way they controlled, manipulated people into voting for them, and it made me feel sick. And I said, the only way to disrupt this conversation is to give people back some sense of agency, some sense of power. And so I left my comfortable executive office suite and went into the space to actually do the workshops myself. I was unhappy with the way we were training people about democracy. It had to be lived in terms of values and understanding what it meant for the individual human being in this nation building project. And I had no damn idea what that was about. I had all the rhetoric, I had the language, but the reality was I felt that we were throwing money away and nothing was really happening in the country. And so it was a quest to say, if we can't keep these politicians accountable differently from the way they're doing right now, we're all in trouble. And that had been my path at the Democracy Development Program. And along comes Peter Block in 2011. And we hosted him in Durban, where I stayed. And it was love at first sight, because when he spoke about the conversations in a very conversational way, I said, oh my goodness, this is, first of all, it's not new. But when I read the book and heard what he said, it just, I've done that. I know lots of people who do that. I know people who think like that. I know how communities work like that. And so it was lots of aha moments in this space. And then when I read the book, The 6 Conversations, it gave me a framework, which I found very useful, that I could actually replicate. I could go into a community and train a community convener, not to do a 3-year course in facilitation, a simple thing about how do you convene this community, using the principles that Peter speaks about and that we know so well. How do you create intimacy, create a container where people feel safe, when they can be heard, and let the magic come from that space. And that journey has made me rethink and re-engineer how I turn up in the world. So I had the power at that time, and I used it, being in the position to redesign the NGO I was working with, so that everything we did was based on creating and building agency in people and communities, able to ask the right questions, people to feel seen and heard and respected, and to share stories. And I found, interestingly, that the 6 Conversations could not really stand on its own. It's so much more than that. It's about process and about structure. So when people come into a hall to have a dialogue, in those days, we would put people in their traditional form, put them in rows, have the speaker mic'd up in front, and pass a roving mic around. That was the way it was always done. And when the first disruption was to disrupt that pattern of how people turned up in the room. And I realized that every step of lots of beautiful aha moments that with the simplest disruption of the status quo, something magical happened in the room with the simplest interruption. So people would come into the room and the chairs were already arranged in groups of 3. First disruption, they had to sit next to a stranger. In this country, it meant black, white, and brown because we were all strangers here. We're trying to find each other. And in that space, just in that space, when we debriefed that space, we heard comments like, I've never before sat and heard a story like this. I never sat with a person of color across from me and shared a personal story about my life. And here we're trying to do a nation building project. I said, oh my goodness, this is the work. This is the work. And so abandon the idea of getting expert speakers in and create a space for us to have our own conversations. And that was a big shift for me, because the wisdom in the room and the stories of hope and possibility just poured into the space. And I think for me, it let me know that when I could let go of the need to be the expert in the room and lead from the front, people would always surprise you. It doesn't matter where it is, whether it's in an informal settlement, in a corporate environment, in a school system, just this simple change in the structure of how you do it shifts everything in the room. And so my other big aha was that with the conversations, I first started doing this work and I took Peter's book and I summarized the entire book. Was every sentence, every page had gold in it. It's the way he frames it, just so powerfully. And I realized that once people were having, wow, it's great and fantastic and everything else, they were overwhelmed by the disruption. It was too much. It was too much. In a country where people had no agency, and to then start talking about you should speak your no, that was too far away. And so the idea was that I felt that if I did that, and I felt it in the room, it was not landing in spaces where people were touched by it and moved into some form of action. And so when I say backwards, instead of trying to talk about the 6 conversations, I would look for an entry point in a story. And it would always come. And use the entry point to amplify some element of those 6 conversations. So I'll say, for example, what I'm hearing here is a doubt. You're not sure this is going to work. And do any of you feel the same way? And then I default to the old model, right? Break into groups of 3 and talk about it. So the idea, and Savantika, tribute to you, is to keep mirroring back to the group what I'm hearing, what I'm sensing, and what I'm feeling. And as it becomes ours to own, the conversation flows quite naturally in this space. So for me, it's been a soft touch process. And sometimes in the workshops, not even mention the 6 conversations, not even mention Peter Block. I don't think it's important. And Peter's always the one telling us that. Don't make me the guru. This is old wisdom. And so when you do it backwards, and at the end, we'll say, well, if you think about this experience over the last 2 days, what struck you about this experience? And it comes up every single time. I love the small group. I love that I got to share my story. I love that I wasn't judged. I love that when I spoke, no one shouted me down. These are all the elements in the structure of belonging. And my question would be, so what if every time we gathered, you felt like this? Wouldn't that be something? And of course, it was a big thing. We always had, our rooms were always full after that. And people didn't come for anything else, not to hear an expert. They came to hear themselves. They came to share their own wisdom in this space. And I think that's been the magic for me in terms of how this has worked. And I think for the surprises came along the way at the most unexpected times, with people sharing deep stories that you never expected, people bringing and offering gifts into the room without being asked, and gifts that are deep and personal, people sharing things that they've never done before in front of others, but in this group, in a couple of hours, feel that they can do that. And then that makes the space for the work to actually start to happen. And I think it might seem oversimple. And I think the thing is, it is really that simple. It's only a question of how we turn up in this space and to convene rather than to lead the gathering to a place. And that's really the essence of this. I think, and I'm thinking as I'm talking, folks, so rambling a little bit. Why this journey? Why even now? I find that more and more as this community starts to grow, and we've had many interactions over the years, there's a sense of something important to do in the world. And every time I enter a room, I feel that inside. And I don't know what it is. And I wouldn't like to place it in a big vision statement for what it is. But it's a feeling that this is what the world needs right now. And we don't have enough of it. We don't need more engineers and MIT leaders and Harvard leaders to tell us about leading. They've effed it up. They've done a damn crappy job of it. That's the truth. We can't do any worse than that. We can't do any worse than that. So the notion of just getting that into my head and saying, actually, please keep your expertise at home. We'll call you at the back end. We need the architects and the designs and engineers when we know what we want to do. Design it for us like that. We don't need them at the front end to tell us how to design our spaces. That's the inversion for me always. It's not that we don't need them. We need them in a context to support us to do our work. And I think that changes the whole game in that space. So right now I'm working on a national program in South Africa, bringing together business partners, and mainly largely white business partners with largely Black principals who are working in marginalized schools that have come from the apartheid era and are battling just to survive in that space. And it's amazing to me how powerful this methodology has been in leveling that. You put them into the same room and get a person of power and privilege to hear a story of someone who's battling with 60 children in a classroom and no textbooks and still expected to perform. And most of them had no idea that this was even possible in this country. And when the connection is made, and Anita's on the call with us, the most amazing stories emerged of people coming together. And for me, that feeds my soul, because I always tell people, and we've touched over almost 2,000 schools now in South Africa, all over the country. And I tell people this, we might be doing it one school at a time, but this is a nation building project. People of power and privilege and position have to use that to lever up and give a hand up, not a hand out, a hand up to those of us in this country who have never had that chance. And we do it in a way without retribution. We do it in a different way of saying that we need each other in this space. And they get it. And they get it so quickly that, so many of these spaces have experts talk to them about diversity and tolerance and understanding and how we should do this and meditations and how to do it. And it hasn't worked. Even now, we still battle with that. It hasn't worked. And I sit there in frustration saying, oh my goodness, just put these people together, convene them, and let them talk about their pain and their hurt and their stories. And you'll get more done in that room than all the expert panels you can put together, because we'll find our own way through it. Find our own way through it. And it might not be the most polished way through it. It doesn't have that expert link, but the sense is, you know what, we own it. And if I own it, I'm invested in it. And then we can start to make the changes. Otherwise, it simply doesn't happen in this space. So, Jeff trying to bring my story into 30 minutes is extremely difficult. I'm trying to pick little pieces of it. But maybe to share some of the strange things that happened at workshops to give you an idea of how powerful it is. We were at a workshop in a community. And at the workshop, when we started off in the preparation for the workshop, we asked people if you had gifts, there were singers and dancers. This community was known for that. Come into the room and share your gift. And on day one of the workshop, someone kept shouting, Donovan, 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 sing, Donovan, sing. And I didn't know who Donovan was. And eventually Donovan stood up and said, no, I won't sing, in that booming voice. And Donovan was actually one of my assistants for the day. And I just met him for that morning. I had no idea he was a singer. I said, please, we must respect when someone says no, it's okay. Don't force anyone to do anything. And I left it alone. And it was a 3-day experience with this community. And on the third day, about half an hour before we're about to close, Donovan comes to me and says, Rama, I want to sing. Being a facilitator, I said, oh my goodness, why now, Don? In my head, of course, why now? I'm just about to close. I had the closing done, set in my head, the song, everything was set, and there it came. And then the voice said, the speaker's voice said, when a gift comes into the room, stop everything and make space for the gift. I said, Donovan, sing your song. And he had the mic, and before he sang, he said, can I speak first, please? And I said, sure. And then he tells us an amazing thing. He says, he was an opera singer. And he won many competitions outside his community. But in his community, he was seen as this profession is useless. What on earth are you going to do with opera? You can't earn money from it. Don't waste your time with it. And he was told this by his family, he was told this by his community, so he stopped it. For 15 years, he didn't sing. He would sing in church every now and then as part of it, but he never sang. But after 3 days of work, he says, having connected and heard your stories, I now want to share my gift with you. And he sang this amazing, beautiful song that moved everyone in the room. But the story behind the song was that when you create the container and people really feel seen, heard, and loved, the gifts and the magic comes on its own. We don't have to coerce it. It just pours into the room. All we have to do is let go of our agenda, of our structure, and be willing to go down those side roads, because that's where the real work is. And it's not often it's not where people want to take it to, right? It's not there. And so another switch is that I know we battle with the 6 conversations and corporate, how this works there. In the NGO space, they're ready, they're ripe for it, because there's already a strong form of association life when you are poor, when you have nothing. You have to use each other. So it's already has the seeds of a community, although it might be slightly dysfunctional. You would think in corporate this would be unheard of. And so, because I do a lot of other consulting work, and since I changed all my work within this structure, I said, I wonder how this would work in a corporate setting. So I was asked to do a team was dysfunctional for bank. And I went in there, and of course, as usual, I prepped like mad, high-powered people in the room, managers and branch managers, and talking money and results and impact and figures and graphs. And I go into the room and they say, well, do you have your PowerPoint? And I said, I don't have a PowerPoint. I said, do you have a flip chart? They said, no, but we can find one for you. And we worked with the flip chart. And, honest, it was the simplest introduction to the story. You all turn up here by choice. What did you leave behind to be here today? That was the question, because I couldn't think of anything else smarter than that. What do you leave behind to be here today? Just that. And that ended up as a 1-hour conversation. And from that conversation, we picked up where the areas were. So, the other question was, what's the best use of our time together? So you see, all these things come in, not because they learned and studied and to design, but because as a facilitator, I just had to be in the present moment, just to hear what they were saying and work with their stuff. And of course, as they spoke in this team, and I was sensing resentment and dissent and all these things, I amplified it. What's the elephant in the room? What are we not talking about that will transform this organization? What's the single biggest thing, if it were true, would change this team? That's a possibility question, right? And so they would explore that, and then we'd visualize it and find a starting point and say, how does this team work? And so without even talking about the 6 conversations, they had an experience for that team in that context of how they were going to work in that corporate space, even though corporate spaces generally are quite toxic, quite hierarchical. But in that small team of 12 people, they found a way to support each other, to do their work. And they were thrilled with the outcome of it. So when I saw that, that liberated me even more. And I always get taken by Peter's coolness when he comes into a room. 1,000 people, 200 people, 15 people, Peter's the same. He steps in, there's no prep, there's no flip chart. He just asks a question, amplifies it in the room, and then lets us get on with it. And so by letting go of that notion of just doing that, even in corporate spaces, they found themselves knowing that the way they were working right now was extremely destructive. They were not happy in that space. They didn't feel supported. They didn't feel held in that space. And it's a lovely what if question. I said, what if you all did feel supported? What if you did all respect each other? What would it look like? And visualize this possibility that was not the future, just beyond reach. And as they planned and designed and worked around that and found the first few steps towards making it happen, it did. And then we would say, as we say in our work, just do the first step. Not 10 steps. Don't make a year plan. Just do one thing. And my learning has been that when you do the one thing and you do it properly, the other things will follow naturally. If I respect you enough, if I trust you enough, I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest enough with you, even if I disagree with you. I will share my weakness with you if I trust you. So all these things are so woven into the fabric of the work that sometimes I feel, and the more I think about, the more I believe it, that the 6 conversations is actually a veneer for the real stuff underneath. The structure and the process of how we convene people into spaces and make them talk about their lives in a way that's transformative. And we have the labels of what the conversations are, but the structure and the container, the basic principles, listen to understand, no judgment. I think those are the core things. And what I find each time we have these spaces and I ask people what's their biggest takeaways, it's never about content. I learned to listen today. I learned to ask good questions. I learned to shut up a little bit more from leaders. And I mean, that's the essence of what we're doing in this work. Without mentioning anything else, I found my voice. I didn't know I could, that when I could speak, no one listened to me. But today I felt heard. And for me, those are all positive, beautiful outcomes for the work that we do in the world. And so my idea of success is that this community, wherever we are, whatever the space is, whatever the space, corporate, church, NGO, whatever it is, we can turn up with these things as an intrinsic part of who we are. And when they see us and we step into the room, we step in without a sense of power, but with a sense of purpose. And the purpose is to engage us in a future that we need to walk together. And that's the bigger picture. We need each other to walk into this future. It's uncertain, it's scary, and the experts have let us down. So now we are on our own. Messiness and all, that's the work. And I feel that more and more as we go into these spaces and do this work, even in corporate spaces, COVID has taught many people in positions of leadership that the old way is simply not working. Their principle was always based on certainty, on results, on outcomes, and that's gone out the door. In the absence of that, all we have is each other, and this works. And that's why this framework is so powerful, and we just need to keep on doing it. So for me, success is not measured by how many spaces I intervene in the work that I do. It's how I turn up and how people turn up when the container is set properly to do their work, to create a better humanity. That's it, Maya. Thinking time.
Oh, Rama, I could listen to you and relate to you with so many things that you said. So I think what I'd like to do now is we're gonna go back into our breakout groups. I know we might have a lot of questions and things going through. What I want us to do is spend a little bit of time in our breakout rooms and just have a discussion about what struck you about Rama's story. What about Rama's story struck you? There's curiosity, whatever that is. We'll spend, I think we'll spend about 6 or 7 minutes, you think, Maya? That'd be good timing to kind of begin our breakouts. So not a long time, don't have to come up with actions. Just what struck you, then we'll come back together and then have more of an open dialogue to interact some with Rama, and as that goes forward. So what struck you about what Rama's story? We'll go into our breakout rooms and then we'll come back as a large group.
I'm going to stay here, Jeff.
Sounds good. Hi, Fatima.
Hi, I apologize for the lateness. Hi, Rama.
Hi, how nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you too, and love your story. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. So am I gonna go into a breakout room, or are you putting people in breakout rooms that they were in together already?
I can move you to one. We have a couple of people who dropped if you'd like to go there.
I like the room that I'm in, but that's okay.
Oh, we like having you here. Well, feel free to stay. I can hop into the one where there's 2 people right now.
Okay. Okay. So I'll hop in with the other 2 people and talk with you all later. Thank you.
You gonna join room 4, Maya? Yep, she's going. Good. You're a blessing, my friend.
Yeah, being in the room with all of you and all the stuff we've done in the world is just such an amazing experience. I mean, there's just so much of wisdom in this room.
And for me personally too, I think, Ram, is that there's so much wisdom in the room and things that have been done, and it's such a tip of what the possibilities are that can be done.
Yeah.
For all the great work that you and everybody's been doing, we're just beginning as a community world to tap into the power, right?
Yeah.
And the beauty.
I mean, I had a lovely conversation with Anne the other night.
Oh yeah, she said I had a really good conversation. So.
I had a lovely. I mean, I don't know where the hell you got her from, but she's so astute at what she does. The questions she asked, wow.
Yeah, so she worked quite a while with Beverly Kroll at Beverly K's training organization. She may have told you that. So she just recently retired. So Beverly asked her if she would join us to help, from an instructional systems designer hat, to try to put not just leader as convener, but even our other stuff into productize it, market it, so we can, and then so we had a conversation, her and Beverly and I, just on a Zoom conversation as a quick introduction. She hadn't heard of Peter. She didn't know what it was. So we said, great, Ann. So between now and next time we meet, we'll send you these videos. Peter's, his 4 videos on the 6 conversations he talks about.
Yeah.
She watched it that day. She sent Beverly a note that night and said, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. It was just,
That's what happens.
Just from looking at some videos, and she's going, this work is just, I can't wait to be part of this work. It's so amazing. I don't know much about it. So yeah, it's just the beauty as that goes. So I think it's going to be a really good blend, I think, Rama, of folks like yourself who've done it and experienced it, and it remains kind of organic as it needs to be. And we do give some folks some structures and some things so they can maybe pick up and do on it. We don't have to wait 10 or 15 or 20 years to get ready, right?
Yeah, I think that's the point.
Maybe how do we accelerate the readiness for people to facilitate but not diminish that it takes special skills? I don't know. It is that interesting polarity, maybe even, right? To let's get it out, let's get it to more people, but it takes time to be, quote, I hate to use the word master, but there's pieces of this, not from an expert perspective, but it really lies into most of us, myself included, have been so trained and ingrained in the dominant narrative.
It's a part of who we are.
With all my good intentions, if I'm not careful, when something happens in the room, I try to control it.
And no matter how much we do this, Jeff, we always get back to that. I mean, all the time. And
I think that's the beauty of it, that awareness, and that will constantly be there, right? I think that's a good tension for us to pay attention. And if we screw it up, then hey guys, look, I just felt myself getting back into wanting to control things.
And we can laugh about it and then get back on track again.
Yeah, we laugh about it. And that's the vulnerability that we share, that says this is not perfection, right? This is open to learning. And yeah,
and it's actually funny, Jeff, when you do this in a workspace and you say, hey, I messed up.
Yeah.
Those are often defining moments in the workshop. You go, oh my goodness, if he can mess up, so can I.
Exactly. Like, oh geez, messed that one up. Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to have a conversation. If it doesn't come up in this next piece, Ram, I'll just see where people have some questions. I'd love to get some of your thoughts about it's still the invitation piece that really is, it's how do we get them in the room to begin with? I think it's still, I don't want to say for me, it's a mystery a little bit, right? Because it's especially in the corporate, how do we get people's curiosity a little bit to come to experience differently? Once we get them in the room, they're hooked, right?
Yeah.
And the other piece I'd love to spend some time with you on is our role as the facilitator when you are, but also when you're a part of the group. Because what we're trying to help leaders do is convene their own teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do I get my full story and voice in the room as Jeff, not as the leader? And I think also, as you said, we don't need any more Harvard grads and those in that role, but we want you in as a human being, right?
Yeah.
So how do we invite and say, yes, that skill set expertise can come in later, bring in who you really are right now. And the challenge is some folks don't know who they are besides the Harvard grad expert.
Well, that's a label they wear on their sleeve, right?
That's my success. That's my, yeah.
Yeah. The two really good questions, Jeff. If you
I'm
don't get a chance to talk about it here.
Yeah,
let's
I
make
really
another
want
time
to,
to talk about
as we design, as we get some things ready. And I think in my mind, if I hadn't told you, in my mind, at the IIRP, you've met some of the folks from IIRP here, the restorative practice.
Yeah.
They want to offer some leaders convener sessions as part of their curriculum this year. So I want to partner with you to, if we can, to maybe you and I lead them.
Okay.
Don't know what it looks like yet. They like it as some of the work that Anne does. Maybe we can try it out.
Yeah.
To see in that space. But all right, I'm gonna bring them back. It's been a bit. It is time. All right, I'm closing the breakout rooms now, Rama, so they'll start going here in a bit.
FYI.
And I'm not going to spotlight Rama. I'm just going to keep everybody.
Yeah. Please don't.
No, that was I think when you were doing your content. I think it's helpful. But now we'll just keep it open and we'll just let folks say just any thoughts or comments they'd like to interact.
Yeah, amongst ourselves, it's much more powerful that way.
Okay, welcome back from a nourishing conversation of 3 to 4 to a nourishing conversation of many, as we say. So yeah, so just wanted to open it up. I don't like calling this a Q&A. It's kind of pedantic a little bit, the piece, but just as you've had a chance to reflect for yourself in your breakout rooms, what struck you, thoughts, questions, ideas you'd like to interact with Rama or anybody else here on the call as we begin to move toward closing out our storytelling session today. So just unmute your mic and speak up if you want to raise your physical hand or your electronic hand. I see Laura's physical hand. You were the first one, Laura, so jump in and what you got for us.
Thank you so much, Rama. And thank you so much for bringing up the topic about working in corporate, because I was sitting here scratching my head because I am working with a dysfunctional team in healthcare of senior leadership members, and they're really hurting, and they don't trust each other, and there's a lot of backbiting going on, and I understand the power of these stories and how that can break down some of these walls, and I understand how powerful that can be. And I so want that for them, which is my agenda too, right? I've done significant work with them, but now I realize really more than anything, it's in Northern Maine, all white healthcare system, very patriarchal. I mean, hierarchical. Healthcare is probably one of the oldest systems on the planet, right? I'm at a loss. And I want to be able to provide that opportunity for them to share their stories with each other. And yet, where to start with these senior leaders who are MDs and PhDs, and help them find their humanity. Yeah, that's my struggle. I would love to hear your response.
Laura, what's worked for me is simply the belief, one, that when you put people in a small group and you get them to share an intimate story, even though there might be resistance, in the face of another story, it gets the barrier down. So I might have a clever story in my head until I hear your story. And when I feel your story, suddenly my story is not authentic anymore. And my experience has been that simply by finding a space of connection to some element in that group, which is at the personal level of being a human being, and I always do it through a story. I've always found that entry points, stories are beautiful because there's no better or worse story. It's just my story. So you can't judge a story. And when people let go of that, then it frees us to make the connection. And I don't have a standard question either. It depends on the context of the group that's there. And trust that when you ask the question, almost always they will find a way to bring something personally on their own. Keep the question slightly ambiguous, personal and anxiety provoking, and the rest up to them.
I agree. Thank you.
Can you clarify?
Yeah.
Can you clarify something, Rama? When you talk about having people tell their stories, there's only one set of questions that explicitly name that in the 6 conversations, right? In the ownership conversation. So I'm in my head, I'm saying, well, you're thinking that all these questions are invitations for people to tell stories, that anytime they're answering a question, it's some version of a story. Am I getting that correctly? Or are you improvising off of this with questions that are explicitly requesting stories that are your own versions of, dissent and gifts, etc.?
So Ben, it's and more than that. So the idea is, if we're speaking about dissent, for example, and I want to bring it into the room to talk about it, I will ask them something like this to share. It always starts with a story. So I'll ask them a question like this: get into a group of 3 and share a story of your life when you said yes to something when you should have said no. And let them talk about it. And then I bring them back, I'll surface it. What struck you about the conversation? What was the cost of your yes? And the oohs and ahs, oh my goodness, because the emotion is alive in the room. It cost me money. I lost trust. I didn't feel supported. I felt judged. Everything that we know that we are trying to do with this work comes into the room. And so then you ask a beautiful question based on that. So why is it that if we know the cost of dissent, we still do it? We still say yes. We agree to things when we don't really want to do it. And that starts a second conversation. So as they talk, and you ask them, so how do you deal with dissent in your room when it comes into your office, into your space? And almost every single time I ask the question, the wisdom comes into the room without me having to give them a lovely input from the structure of belonging. Because they've been using it intuitively, but not having a name or place for it. And I say, you're absolutely spot on. So I don't need to show them the PowerPoint slide about the rules of dissent. You're doing it. So how do we just amplify that in the room and pass it back and forth in the room? And then you get 3 or 4 points about dissent. So when it comes into the room, acknowledge it. Give it space to breathe. Don't take it personally. And they get it because they're thinking about their story. So now there's a relationship between the the theory, the head stuff in the book, and their real life story. I think that's the connection that makes it real for people. I don't want to say yes anymore to things that I don't believe in. I need to go back and change that. This is making me feel sick. And how do I do that? How do you do it? We have a whole lot of other tools and ways to do it. And we simply ask people, so how do you do it? And the magic comes back into the room again. So actually, all you're doing is deflecting and mirroring and putting back. And for me, the principle is to show them how smart they are. I just keep on saying, just look how smart you guys are. You don't need me here in this space. And it doesn't matter who's in the room, the smiles across their faces, CEO, doesn't matter who it is. They love that sense that, hey, you know what? We got you as convener, but boy, we know our stuff. So the acknowledgement of that is enough in this space. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, Ben, but I always use a story as a starting point to relate it to the personal first, and then bring it to the theory after that.
Nice. Great. Thank you, Rama. Absolutely. Fatima, I see your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you, Rama, for that. Thank you for the notion of recreation, like recreating people in their best selves. I appreciate that. I just wanted to offer the Marshall Gantz at Harvard, I think it's at Harvard, he does this thing called public narrative. And the public narrative looks at the I, the we, and the us. So in storytelling, it's really bringing people to that space where they can tell their personal story in relationship to what they're up to. What is it that they are into? And then look at it from the we, meaning all of us who are experiencing that because we've heard a personal story that we can resonate with, that we can relate to, we become a we. And then the us is the now, right now. What is the story we want to tell right now? It's like almost like the possibility story. How do we be in the now, right now, given our I story, our we story? Now it's an us story as a human, as humanity. So I just wanted to put that in the room. His name is Marshall Gantz, and I don't know who's heard of him, but he's bringing this, because he's been an organizer, and being organized means that you've been on the ground with people, with human beings who are, suffering a lot of ways in things, and people in the corporate level, they're suffering, but they don't own that suffering. They sort of push that back. And I think it was Nina was talking about her experience in this relationship to corporate, and I appreciated what she shared. And I don't know how much time we have, but I would love, Nina, for you to share that piece about your experience that Laura brought into the room around corporate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fatima. I think that the comment I made was we just ended a leadership development experience, and all we did was ask the participants to come ready to talk about their journeys. And what we found was how difficult it was for people to do anything other than, well, I worked here for 4 years, and then I did this, and I had this kind of work. And the folks who really embraced and I think brought a view that was powerful and transformational were those who went deep into their own personal stories, work and personal and relationship and cultural things and discoveries. And it was, what it struck for me is how hard it is for people to talk about their whole selves, right? They compartmentalize I work, and so I'm going to tell you my work story. And then maybe when I'm outside of that, I got friends, I'm going to tell you my friend's story. So I'm taking it on as how can I help create those environments for those stories to come out more? Because I think there's power in them.
Beautiful. That's great. Bring our whole self. I know folks are dropping and need to drop. We are at the end of our formal time. So I think I always want more, which I think is a good thing. So you use your networking, reach out to anybody else, to Rama or anybody else in this community with more dialogue and more questions. I will, for folks who can stay, I do want to open it up to see anybody who would like to share a gift that they received during this time, whether it be in your small group or from Rama or anything about the space. If you want to toss it in the chat, that's fine. I love to hear voices as well too, for those that can stay. So what is something that you have received from someone else during this session that has had impact on you?
Well, I was very impacted by Rama's story, and just the truth in what you were telling us, Rama, about how it is and what is possible, and getting back to ourselves and our humanity. That was just a good reminder to me and touched me on a soulful level. So thank you.
The idea of working through story was a gift, and the way that you've made the sixth conversation. Did we lose Rama?
Rama's here.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. The screen got jumbled around. Yeah, the way that you've embodied these conversations and named them as you know, this ancient wisdom, that it's not Peter that you're channeling, but you're also channeling you, and I just, it comes through as so authentic, and in particular in the way that you've centered people's stories and how you've taken the questions and you know, built upon them in how you introduce them. Very, very powerful and inspiring.
Ben. Fatima?
Thanks, Ben.
Similar to what Ben said, Rama, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the way that you brought the conversations, and something you said about the sixth conversation is more like the framework. And we don't have to go in and say, I'm doing this conversation or that conversation, but it's you owning that process and that structure in a way that who you are is bringing it to the people. And I just appreciated that. It's similar to what Ben was saying.
Thanks, Fatima.
All right, folks. So I can sit in gifts all day, so I know we can do that. So just continue. So my ask of each of you, if you received a gift, reach out and share that, what you received from somebody, and not just here, but in your day-to-day lives. Sharing of your appreciations is so powerful as we move forward. I like to say, if we would conclude every conversation we have in our lives with a gift, what a different world this would be. So Rama, my friend, colleague, thank you so much for your vulnerability, your work, your passion, and for sharing with us. Please reach out, folks, to others and continue. If any of others have an interest in sharing your story, we are interested in more storytellers. We will be doing this monthly, and any interest, we will work with you and prepare you, and mainly just help guide you so you can let your story be alive with us in the community. So thank you to my partner, Maya, for your continued sojourner on this journey together, and with all of you folks. So be safe, be well, and go and tell your stories and appreciations. Take care, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rama.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Rama.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Great.
Yeah.
That was lovely.
How you feeling right now, Rama? How would you describe?
I'm home.
Mm.
I'm home with my people, and that's really says it all for me.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate getting the space to share the story.
Oh.
Looking forward. I made a note in my diary, so I come to these things I've diarized already.
Yep.
To come to all the other conversations as
Trying
well.
to get
So thank you very much.
the last Fridays going forward, Rama. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for saying yes. So
Pleasure.
Rama, we'll talk soon, but
Take
take care.
care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Cool.
It all works. So nice partnership there, my friend.